What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm the Croc Nick, and I am back with some more States of Metal. And this time, we're going to go all the way to Arkansas and see what we can dig up in the way of Arkansas metal. Now, this one doesn't necessarily have a theme. These are just bands that I really like from the state, and I think, represent Arkansas pretty well as far as metal. But let's get into what I know about Arkansas, which, first off, don't call it Arkansas. They're really touchy about that. In fact, there might be a unspoken law about calling it Arkansas, which is really interesting because when you look at the history of the name, I guess it was French settlers or explorers that ran into Native American tribes, and they simply could not say the Native American tribe's name correctly, so they just said something close to Arkansas, and it stuck. So it's weird that it's based on a mispronunciation, but if you mispronounce the state, then you're in trouble, even though it's kind of based on that. I don't know. Again, U.S. history is kind of weird. I know the Ozarks are there, and there's a really cool show that I never finished called the Ozarks. Little Rock actually has a Little Rock. I didn't know that. I always kind of wondered why they called it Little Rock, but there is a clear reason that you can go visit because it has like a little plaque on it. Other interesting things I found out, they race garden tillers annually, and they also race ostriches, which is kind of cool. Also, there is a public diamond mine there. Like, you can just go there and dig and possibly find a diamond. Apparently, the largest diamond found in the U.S. was found there. It was like 40 carats, and naturally they named it Uncle Sam because America. The state is also the corporate home of toilet paper makers Angel Soft and Quilted Northern, which that's something I came across, which I thought was really interesting, and I still wonder why we even need commercials for those sorts of products. They kind of sell themselves. The state also has some really interesting / kind of weird, kind of dumb laws. Apparently, it is illegal for the Arkansas River to flow above the Main Street Bridge, which that's kind of hard to enforce because the laws against the river, like, I don't know, that just seemed really dumb. But it's also illegal to openly flirt, apparently. Now, I don't think any of these laws are actually enforced, but they're still, I guess, in the codex, so I don't know, maybe it's time to go over that one more time. In the town of Fayetteville, apparently there was a newspaper editor fight. Pretty much there were two rival papers that were, competing for the same market, and they decided that they would have a public fight, and the loser would have to leave town and sell their paper essentially to the winner. And that's how things got decided in that town when it came down the news. Probably one of the most interesting things that I found revolved around a place called the Booger Hollow Trading Post. Now, this place is abandoned, but apparently they had a double-decker outhouse, which never functioned properly because it never should, because a lot of reasons. Now, apparently the whole forest around this area was supposed to be haunted by the Boogeyman, which they ended up calling the Boogerman, which, I don't know, that doesn't necessarily sound nearly as scary. Like, if you tell your kids the Boogerman's gonna come for you, they're probably just gonna giggle. Oh yeah, and the state is governed by one Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who we all know from her lovely press conferences years ago, and her warm, kind demeanor, and the fact that she may or may not have cornered the market on resting bitch face for the world. But this place also has some pretty cool metal bands, and again, this one's going to be a little bit more of a variety. There really isn't a set style of metal I'm going after, even though I think towards the back half of this, we're going to get a little bit more on the sludge and doom side. But I have 6 albums to show you here, so let's get down to it. Living Sacrifice, Conceived in Fire. This is the 6th album from this Little Rock metalcore band, though this band's style has definitely shifted around over the years. They started off as more of a death thrash act, which I really love their first 2 albums. I think they are just absolutely riffy and awesome, fast and aggressive and well written. And I also think the vocals on them are absolutely terrible. But around the late 90s, they shifted over to more of a metalcore kind of groove metal sound, and I really got into them on their album, The Hammering Process. Now, this was the album that followed, and I really enjoyed this one, though it is a little bit different than The Hammering Process, which to me, I would say is like a metalcore staple. I absolutely love the grooves on it, the breakdowns, the extra tribal percussion. which are all still very much on here, though I think this one kind of takes a step back and kind of brings a little bit of their old sound in terms of like that more death thrash vibe. The opening track, Imminent War, has, you know, more blast to it. There's a little bit more of a death metal edge. Same thing with Separation and The Martyr. There's more of that thrashy bite to them, but a lot of this still kind of hangs on to that more mid-tempo metalcore groove. Lots of heavy breakdowns, big syncopated riffs, especially on tracks like Symbiotic, 3x3, We Carried Your Body, Ignite, and Reach for the Sky. And yeah, this band's Christian metal, so we definitely get a lot of Christian themes on here. Strangely enough, while I think this one might be heavier in some facets compared to the Hammering Process, there is a fair amount of melody on here. The song The Poisoning has clean vocals on it and almost kind of has like an Alice in Chains like vocal harmony to it. And the song Reach for the Sky has some really cool spoken word, and it is decidedly a more melodic track in spots too. But Bruce Fitzhugh's vocals on here are still as vicious as ever. He's just got this nasty roar. It's very dry and throaty at times, and I just really dig it. And despite there being some more accessible moments on here, he still keeps it very grounded in being just heavier than hell. There's even some stuff on here that kind of reminds me of the more groovy era of Napalm Death, like Send Your Regrets. It kind of has like a fear, emptiness, and despair sort of vibe. My only real issue with this album is the fact that it still does have the extra tribal percussion, but I feel like they moved them way back in the mix, where on the Hammering Process they're very prominent and they complement the actual drums really well. Here they feel just pushed back in the mix and they're just not doing nearly as much. Like they weren't necessarily committed to doing more of the tribal rhythms anymore, but they still had their extra percussionists in there, and I mean, it was a huge part of the Hammering Process, so I don't know, it feels like it was kind of a half commit there, but yeah, I really dig this album. I dig a good chunk of Living Sacrifice's back catalog, and I do really like both eras, though again, those vocals on the early albums are not great. But yeah, if you like heavy, groove-laden, just riffy metalcore, bordering on groove metal and occasionally death thrash, check this album out. It's an absolute monster. Soul Embraced, Dead Alive. This is the fourth album from this also Little Rock metalcore / melodic death metal act that actually features Rocky Gray and Lance Garvin from Living Sacrifice. This was sort of an offshoot band that I guess during Living Sacrifice's, you know, hiatuses and such, this was where they kind of picked up and wanted to continue on. Now this is definitely more focused on melodic hooks than Living Sacrifice. In fact, I would say a lot of this is indicative of probably one of the most prevalent styles around 2008 when this was released, which was, you know, more melodic metalcore. Like this was just a huge scene. And believe me, the Christian metalcore scene was really big on that. You know, the Agony scene, As They Lay Dying, etc. There were a ton of them doing that style. And Soul Embrace were definitely one of those, though I actually think they leaned a little bit more towards melodic death metal overall. Like, granted, you have your big kill switch engage style breakdowns in here, especially in the song Breaking Point, but there's a lot of stuff that is more akin to like mid-period In Flames, Soilwork, maybe a little bit of Dark Tranquility minus the keyboards. Lots of catchy riffs, lots of great lead work. In fact, Rocky's lead work on here I think is really solid. And he's definitely a very adept musician. He did the production here as well as Eric Rutan, which I thought was really surprising when I read the liner notes. Like, all right, well, man, he's kind of got his hands in a lot of things. But Rocky also did time in Evanescence as well before he inevitably got fired, just like everyone else except for Amy Lee does in that band. There's some nice thrashy tracks in here, like Judas I've Become and Bloodstained Nevada. And there's even some stuff in here that kind of calls back to like 90s groove metal as well, like The Devil's Reflection, La Fin Absolue du Monde, Into Darkness, which kind of has like a little bit of a Pantera flair, like you kind of hear it in the riffs. It's a little bit of like a southern tinge to them. And Crawl, which does feature a clean chorus, but unfortunately that clean chorus really doesn't have much of an impact. And I actually like the vocals on here. This guy has like an almost blackened sort of shriek. Again, fits very much in the style of like a lot of mid-2000s melodic death metal. While I don't like this as much as Living Sacrifice, I do still enjoy this. It is very much a product of its time, but it is solid and well executed. Around this time I was really big in terms of just metalcore and melodic death metal, and hearing a band that blended the two really well, I was big into that. Like it kind of fit in that same category as Darkest Hour, and I'm still a huge Darkest Hour fan. But yeah, if you like melodic death metal and like kind of mid-2000s metalcore, check this out. This is the only album I own by them, but I do know that their earlier stuff is a little bit heavier. So if you're looking for maybe something a little bit less accessible than this one. Maybe check out some of their earlier stuff, but either way, check them out, give them a chance. Pretty solid band. Terminal Nation, Holocene Extinction. This is the debut full length from this Little Rock band, which, yeah, there's a lot of Little Rock bands. In fact, there's only one on here that isn't from Little Rock. It's not a lot of like bustling metropolises in Arkansas. Anyway, this is a hardcore / death metal hybrid, very much in the vein of bands like Gatecreeper, Zabalba, Creeping Death, and Cruelty from Japan, which they actually did an absolutely amazing split with not too long ago. This might be the heaviest album on this list. This is chock full of down-tuned riffs, hardcore chugging and breakdowns, tons of death metal riffing. It is groovy, it is vicious as hell, and it even occasionally borders on grindcore in some spots. Arsenic, Earth, Master Plan, Thirst to Burn. These songs bring in a lot of like punk and hardcore, but again with those blast beats and those more hardcore down-picked riffs, there's definitely like sort of a power violence sort of vibe to it. But yeah, this album is just brutal as hell. There are slam riffs, there are death doom breakdowns, and there's a cool dual vocal thing going on here. So you get this cool back and forth between more death metal roars and hardcore screams. And while a lot of the songs are more short and punishing, kind of like Nails or Napalm Death, you do get some longer tracks that even kind of explore more atmosphere and melody. There's even some stuff on here that kind of reminded me of Paradise Lost, albeit like covered by a hardcore death metal hybrid band. In fact, it kind of opens and closes on a more doomy note. The opening track, Cognitive Dissonance, comes in with just big, droning, heavy riffs. And the last track, Age of Turmoil, is just doomy and bleak, but also kind of oddly melodic. I don't know, this band just does a great job of balancing out death metal brutality with that hardcore rage. And the production here is absolutely amazing. There's a great reverb on the snare. Everything on here is punchy. The guitar tone is just absolutely monstrous. And lyrically and thematically, I would say their subject matter is as brutal as their music. It's very socio-politically charged and lots of commentary about the world we live in. I mean, Holocene Extinction, I mean, that sounds close to a cattle decapitation song or album title. And I think thematically a lot of their stuff would probably line up. Now, sadly, not too long ago, their bassist Chase Turner got in a car wreck. Luckily, he is doing fine now. But it was really awesome to see the fans come in and help. He did a GoFundMe to cover his hospital stay and all that stuff. And it's awesome to see fans help out bands like that because, I mean, this is not a style of music you do to get popular and rich and famous. Generally with a lot of underground bands and such, there's a lot of sacrifice and struggle to keep a band on the road and keep them functional. So it's just awesome seeing fans come in and help when they absolutely needed it. But yeah, this band is absolutely fantastic. This came close to making my year-end list in 2020, but that was another loaded year and they were just on the outside. This is great music to break something to. A table, a window, maybe an arm. Whatever you choose. Again, if you're a big fan of bands like Creeping Death, Gatecreeper, Zabalba, and Cruelty, like this band lines right up. Definitely check this out. I'm hoping we'll hear more from them this year, but you know, we'll see. But either way, check this one out. It's just an absolute banger. Deadbird, Twilight Ritual. This is the second album from this Fayetteville stoner doom sludge band. It's kind of a hybrid of all those things. Main point is it is slow, sludgy, bleak, and just oppressive and doomy as hell. Now this band features current and former members of another band that I will bring up, actually be the last band that I bring up, and they definitely share some similarities with that band because this is the whole doomy part of this video here because we're getting slow and murky, and I figured this was a good one to kick it off with. This is all about just droning, heavy, sludgy riffs with a massive bass tone on here. The bass is constantly sizzling in the background with every strum. I love the sound of this. This just has that kind of just ultra heavy, murky sound like you kind of get with bands like Monolord. But stylistically, I would compare them a little bit more to like early Mastodon, Neurosis, and even Yob. Vocally, you kind of get that Yob dynamic where you get like heavy growls and bellows, but also interesting clean vocals and clean vocal harmonies on here. And kind of like Yob, you get some like interesting almost post-metal songwriting dynamics in terms of like slow building and adding layers, like namely the song The Riverbed. I love the just really labored build to that song before it gets to the absolutely crushing riffs on that song. The clean playing that starts off that song and kind of builds up to the heavier moments, I think is actually really beautiful. It's just quite a pleasant melody before you get down to the just absolutely crushing breakdowns on there, especially the one with that really weird sliding riff. And this isn't all like super sludgy and slow. I mean, most of it is, but Feral Flame actually has like a big crust punk section. You get some big downpicked, heavy, kind of punky riffs in there. And while this has like the density and heaviness of sludge, it also has a lot of like warmth to it. Like the overall sound of it, that heavy drone, it feels very warm and again, kind of a little bit closer to stoner metal at times. But this band is great at just building these songs because most of these songs are pretty damn long. That coupled with the atmosphere, it kind of makes these songs very immersive and easy to kind of get lost in. This is just a great, moody, dark, heavy listen with, you know, intermittent spots of beauty. But for the most part, it's all about the stoner drone, the heft of the guitar tone, that big droning bass. I love stuff like this. This is just great to just kind of press play and just kind of let it go. And yeah, this band is just absolutely awesome. I have a follow-up to this one, though I like this one just a little bit more, even though I got that last one more recently. This one I just kind of connected with. It just kind of exudes everything that I love about stoner doom and sludge metal. Pretty much if you're a fan of Yob and definitely the other two bands that I'm going to bring up here, I strongly recommend checking this out. This is really solid. Pallbearer, Foundations of Burden. This is the second album from this Little Rock doom metal act. I have become a huge fan of this band. I actually saw them on this tour. Actually, if you saw the Georgia States of Metal, the same tour that I saw Royal Thunder and Enslaved on, this was the first time I saw Pallbearer when they were touring on this album. And yeah, this album is possibly one of my favorites by the band. When it comes down to doom metal, well, stoner doom, arguably sludge metal too. I don't know, it's kind of like all of those things. Very few bands kind of capture that melancholy feeling with melody and vocals like Pallbearer. Every ounce of this album sounds dreary and somber as hell. The vocals are very haunting and predominantly clean. In fact, I can't remember if this band actually has any growled vocals at all. But it's the music itself that just really captures that just absolutely bleak vibe. There are no choices, their riffs, the overall production on here, everything is just unbelievably sad. Like this is almost like a funeral doom album with sort of a stoner doom filter kind of placed over it. The production here is absolutely wonderful. The guitars are huge and chunky, but there's lots of great clean passages, especially on the title track, which I think is a huge standout on here. And the song The Ghost I Used to Be, which is absolutely beautiful and possibly sadder than the end of Old Yeller. Watcher in the Dark has one of my favorite moments on here with its absolutely beautiful pianos and the gorgeous lead that is on there. You can feel every ounce of emotion that was poured into this, and I absolutely love that. The fact that there are huge, long instrumental breaks in between verses too. It gives you a lot of time for all these riffs and melodies to sink in. And I love the absolutely awesome 1-2 punch of the last two tracks. Ashes is a little bit more subdued. It's a little bit cleaner and softer, but still overwhelmingly sad. But Vanished actually gets a little bit more sinister and dark. It's probably the heaviest track. Like it kind of gets a little bit more of that doomy oppression versus a lot of this is very melancholic, like, you know, almost kind of like My Dying Bride-ish in a way. While the sinister droning riffs really carry that, it does have some amazing vocal harmonies, and the end of it is just absolutely beautiful. I love this band. I love every album that this band has put out, and that kind of made it tough picking one, but I mean, honestly, this is the one I probably come back to the most. This band just writes absolutely amazing doom metal that is, you know, very emotional, and you can kind of connect with the overwhelming levels of depression that, you know, they just kind of pour out in their music. If you're a big fan of bands like Chemist, albeit with like kind of less of the epic heavy metal vibe, or Sleep, and Yob and stuff like that, definitely check out this band. I mean, they are pretty well known. They are a Nuclear Blast now, but if you have not, for whatever reason, and you're a big Doom fan, I strongly recommend this band and just pretty much get all of their stuff because it's all amazing. And finally, we have Wake, Hell is a Door to the Sun. This is the second album from this Little Rock experimental sludge band slash avant-garde sludge. I don't know. This band is very strange, but they're also very sludgy. And for years, I was trying to pronounce this with the R in front because, it's spelled with an R in the front. But apparently it's just pronounced Wake, and that would have simplified things in terms of me trying to tell people about this band. Like, oh, wow, what's the name of them? Rwake? I'm reasonably sure a couple of my friends thought I was having like a mini stroke just trying to tell them the name of this band. Now, this band has been MIA for quite a few years. Their last album, Rest, came out in 2011, and they've been essentially on hold for a while. And I really want them to come back, especially after listening to this one. This band is just sort of wild, especially in its weird, jagged transitions, odd atmosphere. You have two different vocalists with two very distinctly different voices. There's a lot of stuff in here I would compare to like early Neurosis, especially around Souls at Zero. Also, this band shares members with Deadbird, so there's definitely a little bit of that. And another band that kind of came to mind is the band Atlas Moth. There are definitely a lot of similarities, though. I think this band is almost kind of proggy in a way, especially in its transitions. It can be surprisingly technical at times. There's lots of synths and atmosphere, and the transitions are very odd at times. The opening track on here, The Cat and the Snake, opens up with a sample from, I'm not entirely sure what movie it was, but I know it was Royal Dano, which very few people would probably know who he is. He was the hick farmer that got killed in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. He was also in House 2. He was Gramps, the undead grandpa. It's probably a better way to describe that role, but that's all I got right now. Anyway, this album is sort of strange. Like the song Smog Monster, it's just slow and kind of monstrous sounding. Lots of weird lurching riffs. And part of me thinks they kind of named it after the Smog Monster from Godzilla Hedorah, but I don't know. I mean, this band is weird, so I'm not ruling it out. But those weird transitions are the thing that really get me, like the title track. There are like some really cool, clean sections with beautiful guitar harmonies, and then they just shift on a dime to like just some of the heaviest stuff with just droning, disgusting, just kind of nasty sounding riffs. The song essentially lures you into the back of a van with candy and then hits you over the head with a shovel. You even have some almost Toolish moments on that song. The Stoner Tree is kind of an interesting one because this is where you kind of see their dark sense of humor come in, because there's a whole lot of really interesting lyrics on there, especially the repeated refrain of "I don't give a shit about Jesus, I just want to get high." I mean, I get it. And then Sight Beyond Sight has these strange sliding noises all throughout the song. It's almost disorienting and kind of like off kilter. And then the last track, The River / Traskwood, has this really weird skit at the end. This whole album is, again, like a very strange, kind of odd album in terms of how it's constructed and put together, but there's a lot of cool things that go into it. But it's really interesting and really engaging, and I feel like it's telling me some really weird story, and I don't fully understand it, but I'm still absolutely fascinated at the people telling me the story. So yeah, if you're looking for some absolutely weird sludge metal that kind of borders again on like prog and avant-garde. Like if Psy were to make a sludge metal album, it might actually sound like this. Check this album out. I would say check out their other ones too. I think they're all pretty good. The last one was okay. I don't know. I thought it was just a little uneven, but check this one out for sure. This one's an absolute banger. And that is it for this one. Arkansas, again, didn't have as much, but there were still some really good ones in there that I wanted to go over. And I have another one lined up that is definitely themed with one style, and definitely a really cool underground scene that I can't wait to get into, so stay tuned for that. But if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel, but thrallsmetal.com is ready to go to get Thralls Metal stuff. We have new shirts. We have older shirts that are on a discount, and we even have hats. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, check out the link down below. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that stuff. It means the world to us. 2024, whole new year to do a lot of crazy content, and we already have some really cool stuff lined up. I've already got enough stuff to do some collection updates, and those are probably going to be a lot of the things that I missed last year. And of course, retro reviews, where you got a couple we're working on right now, and Black Dahlia Murder ranking whenever we get together for that one. So yeah, plenty of stuff coming in the future. So once again, thank you all so much, and we will catch you later.